Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on your screen. It is Tuesday evening in Germany, and it's time for a CRM conversation. Today, we are quite flexible, adaptable, and so to say, we reacted agile to a situation which came up. And we're grateful that Graham jumped in on a spot our friend Kenneth Christensen opened unwillingly through to his illness. We wish him all the best here from our end, that he recovers fast and that we can join in on the 2nd of September on his topic on global partner management and all what is coming around with this. Having said that, we had last time an interesting learning experience on outcome-based CX approaches. Now, this was the reason why I, on an instant, thought about giving not only Dr. G a note that we are discussing this with Trent Rossini, but hoped at that time that he might jump in with some comments. So it even became better. He is here live on your screens, and we are approaching that topic from a different angle and look more into the opportunities out of his experiences and what we learned so far over the time, years, ages, so to say, and especially last Tuesday. But before we start off our conversation, I'm curious that not all of you will know Dr. G. He is today not only our special guest, but we welcome a true pioneer in the world of customer-centric transformation. He was Chief Innovation Officer at Optima Partners and one of the most respected voices in customer relationship management and customer experience. He is very active. You can read a lot of him, and you have just to drop by LinkedIn. He's also very knowledgeable, and he is always stunning us with some of the quotes out of that you have the impression an encyclopedia will not match with what he has towards his eyes and his head and on his mind. With over 20 years of hands-on experience leading high-impact transformation projects across industries, from automotive to aviation, telecoms, and financial services, Grham is not just a strategist, but a practitioner who actually done this stuff. As CRM legend Paul Greenberg, greetings, puts it in a quote. Grham is known for his bold thinking, framework-driven approach, and his ability to challenge conventional wisdom. He is described as an iconoclast, a man of strong convictions, someone who can bug the hell out of you, but always with something to back it up. Now, having said that, I don't want you to get blushing again, such as not only from the heat under your roof, but what I give statements. What did I miss, Graham? And welcome again.
Not a lot, really. I think that other than the fact I was never Chief Innovation Officer at Optima, but a senior associate for many, many years, other than that, I think it's pretty accurate.
Lovely. And jumping in, you made some comments on where the development, as we had another conversation on user adoption over the ages and over the development of CRM towards CX. What is, from your perspective, outcome-based CX, and what does it mean in the context of modern customer experience management? And where the heck are the hooks where you dig in and say, take a different perspective, please? Then you have more fun. Go for it.
Is that a question, or is it like an encyclopedic answer you're looking for? Because that actually is a whole load of questions all rolled into one. So let's try and tackle two.
Pick one, my friend. Pick one and go for it.
Pick a couple, actually. So the first one is this notion of customer experience. So I don't actually talk about the customer experience normally.
Yeah.
I normally talk about the customer service experience. So that's not about customer service, what you get after the sale. but it's about the customer. It's about the service they come to you for. That's what they come to you for. They come to you for service, for help, for support, or for something else, where they can't get it done themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's about the experience of what they get. So my view has always been, and I've written about it quite extensively, is that customers come for service. We provide a service. We help them to get things done, and an experience at the same time. The two are inextricable. If you deliver bad service, you're probably going to have a bad experience. If you deliver great service, you're probably going to have a good experience. We need to focus on the service and the service, not the customer and not the experience. Focus on the service, and the two will come. So in terms of your
service that sorry for interrupt, Graham, but
okay.
if you talk of service, this is more than just like customer service, right?
Absolutely. So if I take a more fundamental perspective on service, it's the exchange of competencies and capabilities for the benefit of another. So I do something to help you, that's providing you with a service. Normally, we would exchange service. So you give something to me, I give something to you. That might be another service in return, information, support, help. It might also be money or a tool for me to use, for example. So this exchange, fundamental to service dominant logic that now permeates most of at least academic service thinking and increasingly service design thinking, is really quite important. It's not just customer service. It's the whole provision of support, help, and capabilities to help somebody else get something done. So to go back to your earlier question about what's really important in CX. So I think over a period of time, and CX has been around for a long time. As I was saying in the preamble before, I drew my first journey map in terms of a service blueprint in 1995 for Ford of Deutschland, in fact, on a piece of work I was doing for them as a private support for the head of marketing. The Experience Economy was published in 1998 or 1999. What about that time? So 3 or 4 years later. And for me, that was the foundation, the start of the customer experience movement as it's become known. And over time, it's grown and expanded. It's very widely used, but we have several problems that we've seen. And I don't want to belabor this because everybody's talked about them to death already. We have a problem in that often people in charge of CX aren't in charge of any of the interactions or any of the service touch points where the experience is delivered. They're not in charge of sales, not in charge of marketing, not in charge of service, not in charge of operations, not in charge of product development or any of those things that actually create the interactions that you're going to have with us and when you get service. So they have to influence from afar, and that's always going to be a difficult position, particularly, second point, if you don't have any resources. So I worked with a major UK telco a few years ago doing something completely different, but I sat next to the CX team and we got on really well together. They had a team of 5 people. Marketing had 400 people.
Oops.
They had no real power and authority to get anything done. And what has come out of that, I think, over the years is recognition that it's actually really, really hard to make CX create meaningful differentiation. We step back 1 second, if you look at contemporary strategy today, we recognize there are only 2 sources of competitive differentiation. You can either be the lowest cost provider, or you can provide meaningful differentiation that's meaningful for customers. Customer service isn't a low-cost strategy typically. Even for Ryanair, it's not a low-cost strategy. It's about other things. So in order to be successful with customer experience, it has to provide meaningful differentiation. Yet if I look at the Institute for Customer Service quarterly UK CSI scores, even though it's gone up a little bit over the last quarter, a year ago it had reached a 10-year low, with the complaint handling dragging it down significantly year after year after year. And you only have to look on LinkedIn to look at all those disaster stories from people talking to airlines and banks and utilities and telcos. It's a disaster. Customer service is a disaster, and service generally is a disaster. So it doesn't seem to have really worked. And what we find when we talk to the CFO is they don't believe it creates economic value. We know how to make it create economic, but that's not what the CX people typically do because they don't have the authority or the responsibility to actually make it happen. So it ends up in a difficult position whereby they don't have the staff, they don't have the authority, they don't have the backing of the CFO. It's very hard to produce meaningful differentiation in the competitive marketplace. It's really, really hard to make success, which is why I think we need to move on from CX as was and start to think about other things instead.
Aren't there two major problems involved in that? One being that, okay, so there are these 5 CX people. They may or may not own something, but the concentration of CX initiatives usually and regularly is focused on individual touch points. Means there is probably a local optimization going on without looking at the whole job that customers actually want to achieve, means the journey that they are on. This is part one. And part two is I still rarely see CX initiative or CX professionals being able to tie their objectives and their goals into strategic business objectives.
That is a challenge. So let's tackle the incremental nature of CX. So being incremental is not a problem. So if you look at most innovation, most large corporations, 99% of their innovation is incremental changes, Kaizen and those sorts of things, making small changes. In fact, companies like Toyota, I don't know if you can see this.
Yeah.
40 years, 20 million ideas. This is a book's a few years old now, but it describes the Toyota suggestion system that I experienced when I was working with Toyota. It's extraordinarily effective at producing big changes through that 1% improvement every week or every quarter over time that produces big changes. So that's not really a fundamental problem. The problem is that I think that, as we talked about a minute ago, you may produce incremental changes or want to make small changes, make small improvements, but you don't have the power to implement them. You have to go and talk to marketing about improving how they do campaigning and campaign response management. You have to go to talk to sales or customer support or whatever, or customer success, as a key account management now called in B2B. So you don't have the power to make those changes. You have to go and talk to somebody else and persuade them, and they're always very, very busy, and their budgets are always very, very tied up with doing other things. They get measured, managed, and monitored against. So you have to find a way to get your small change, your small improvement into their budget, into their timetable. Otherwise, you have to wait till next year and the whole thing starts again.
Maybe, but shouldn't the little optimization be part of a bigger plan? As I said a little earlier in our pre-talk, so it's the way of thinking big while acting small.
I understand.
It's about not forgetting the main objective.
That's fine. I think we always need to have in managing, in facilitating change. I'm very careful about my use of words. We don't manage change. We facilitate change. Management implies control. We don't have control over a lot of change that goes on in organizations, particularly not cultural change. So we facilitate change. Older approaches like Kotter's approach and Sengi's approach and all the other ones, or the ProSci approach, are driven by a model where you have typically for large change programs a North Star, a future state you want to get to, and then you have all these complicated plans to get there. But 80% of those fail. So over the years, I was trained in, I think, 2009 by Dave Snowden's Cynefin cognitive organization, the Cynefin way of thinking. And I've learned by doing the approach to what they call SGI mapping. And that provides a powerful toolkit to, rather than plan everything out in detail, which is going to fail anyway when something changes, you think about the direction of travel, and then you're able to make lots of small changes. You're accentuating the things that are positive that you think you want to happen. You're damping down the negative things that you really don't want to happen. You're looking at things you can't change to see if they adapt and change in the future, like regulations and what does that mean. And you're looking at things that can very easily tip things over if they change it out of your control, and try to dampen those down as well. And then you can go forward in a series of steps to facilitate change. So change through 1,000 small interventions run through this large, humongous plan that has a very low probability of ever coming to pass. And I would say in all my years of consulting, I've been consulting for 35 years now, I've only experienced one successful transformation, one out of 35 years, maybe 40 large clients. That one transformation was the British Airways turnaround in the late 80s, when Mrs. Thatcher basically said, either you become fit for privatization by doing whatever you need to do, and they chose to become customer oriented, driven by Lord Marshall and Lord King, Colin Marshall at the time, and Lord King as CEO and chairman, or I will close the airline down because we don't need a loss-making airline. A few years later, in the most amazing textbook change program I've ever seen, they did the impossible and managed that transformation. I have never seen anywhere an even vaguely, remotely successful transformation in all my years working with large corporate clients.
Unfortunately, they did not continue their successful path.
That's another story. That was the arrival of Bob Ailing and focus on cost cutting and trying to keep pace with the American Airlines. But that's a different story. That's when they lost their mojo, as it were.
Yes, and giving me that hint on different perspectives, I would like to share Tony's comment that customer experience is highly subjective experience directly related to expectations. Low expectations and price, easier to exceed expectations. People also have wildly different preferences, which make differentiation possible and valuable.
And of course, Tony's exactly right. You know, we've had models like the zone of tolerance around for 30, 40, 50 years now. So, you know, most customers have, for most customers in a simple world, we'll talk about more complicated world in a minute. In a simple world, they have a range of things they expect. They have a maximum expected service and a minimal acceptable service, and providing in between the two, then you're pretty much okay. If you're towards the top, that's good because that provides you an element of differentiation. But as Tony says, people want different things, and that changes over time with your experience. So as we become more experienced, we adapt our perceptions of what's possible and what we actually think we're going to get anyway. We don't change what we're trying to do typically. That's one of the things we found through issues. We talk about customer jobs. They don't change typically very much at all, but we change our expectations based on what we've found has worked in the past and what we think will work this time. That can go up and down based on what you experience, of course. And of course, if you can manage those things, then you can provide a little differentiation. But the thing I would point out, I'll point out two things here. One of those is not all customers are equally valuable. So those that come to you because you've won a sales promotion. So I worked with a great guy called Wim Rampen a few years ago at a Dutch insurance company, and he had an almighty battle with their sales department. They was very, very happy to boast about their increasing sales figures for automotive insurance until Wim pointed out they had to keep customers for 2 years before they made any money on them. An average they left after 1 and a bit years. So you were selling yourself into penury as a consequence. So selecting the customers in a commercial environment, the customers that you want to deal with, and they're probably going to be what Joe Rubinson calls the movable middles, those that have the biggest return on investment in marketing, sales, and service, because they're probably going to buy one more holiday or one more meal or one more whatever it is, rather than those that always lose you money, or those that are going to be loyal to you no matter what you do, which you don't need to spend a lot more money on anyway, other than keeping them happy by doing what you've always done in the past. That's the first thing. And the second point is, I think, it's easy to overdo things. We don't. Customers talk about being customer oriented. As companies talk about being customer oriented. You can read it in their annual reports, and the CEOs talk about it on investor calls. When you go and talk to customers, often the reality is somewhat different. There was that famous Bain study years ago. Remember that one, the service delivery gap study in 2005, that found that 80% of managers thought they provided a superior customer experience. But only 8% of customers agreed with them. And I have seen other studies from Deloitte and others in the meantime that basically shows the same figures, plus or minus. So we think we're doing a great job, but customers beg to differ. So until we understand what customers really want, or more likely what they're actually going through, because it's not about understanding needs as a static item. It's about understanding their experiences as a field rather than a journey. All those things pulling you in different directions as you go through, and your experience emerges over time. If we don't understand those things, how can we co-design or co-create or co-produce, co-compose service solutions together with customers that actually meet their needs? And as Tony says, not all customers have the same needs, even in quite serious things. So there was a bit of research a few years ago by Vargo, McCall Kennedy, and I can't remember the author, I think it's Patterson, looking at co-creation styles of health service patients. These are people that are undergoing cancer treatment. And what they found in their research was that some customers or some patients just wanted to leave it to the professionals to get on with it, and they accept whatever comes along. Some patients want to be involved in every decision, want to be informed, want to have decision-making authority throughout their entire treatment. And there were lots of little groups in the middle. And I think they found 5 groups in total, all wanting different things. So if you want to serve all these customers, you need to be able to understand what they want and how you give it to them. That leads us to the second point, which is you'll have heard of Ross Ashby's law of requisite variety. So the more variety we want to deal with, the more variety we need in our internal processes and systems to deal with that variety. Variety gets the variety. So which points us back again to trying to understand who our target customers are and focusing around those in a commercial environment or in a more of a commercial, but more like healthcare or financial services or other things where we have a duty to serve customers. It's thinking about how can we provide service to more of our patients or more of our customers by using adaptive design approaches and co-composition approaches. We'll come on to that in a minute.
I was just asking myself, as you mentioned a lot of research and the expectation management, and that it is quite tricky to catch them when you were good, or that you more catch them when you were not performing to their liking, then they give you some response. How do you catch them in the right moment, and with what would you like to catch them for their feelings?
What a great question.
The living experience.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it is a great question. It's quite an important question. So, for example, from the research of some of the behavioral scientist scholars, that a negative experience is perceived as between 3 to 8 times more influential than the equivalent positive experience. Yet I see a lot of people talking about we want to improve all these positive experiences, but they completely ignore the negative ones that have the biggest impact for a variety of reasons to do with how we process information. So picking up information isn't only about having surveys. I mean, I don't see it myself because I don't work in that part of the business of CX, but I see a lot of CXs complaining that CX is basically about voice of the customer and NPS and surveys that are providing useful information. There's a lot of criticism of NPS, but it's by itself, it's not very useful, I don't think. But it's part of a balanced scorecard. So early 90s thinking again, a couple of Norton. It's part of a balanced scorecard. It can be quite a useful measure in terms of whether people are going to recommend you, but it only fits alongside whether people repeat purchase and whether they have a strong relationship with you in the first place, which is part of a balanced scorecard. These can be quite useful, but also there's a whole variety of sources. We look to surveys. As a funny point, I spent some time working with a European airline a while ago and analysing some 20,000 different responses to customer VATIM's response to contacts with customers. And I did ask the question, what do you do with these? Now you've got we get thousands every month. And the answer was, well, not a great deal. So you're thinking, you get all these responses back from customers saying, and out of that, I could identify there were 8 or 10 key customer jobs to be done. 8 or 10 key touch points, most of which were in the control of the airline, but it could have had a significant impact on fixing things that go wrong. That's what you hear about most of all, or making things better. But it was nobody's responsibility, which is often what we find in large organizations. Nobody's responsible for improving things. I get the results, but I'm not responsible for actually doing anything with them other than reporting, and we ignore that. The next month is coming along shortly anyway. So you can get information from all sorts of places. You get information from surveys. I'm not a big fan of surveys by and large, because we often ask the questions we want to have answered rather than questions customers want to tell us. You can get it from verbatim. You can get it from third parties like social media. I sat and looked at for another client, looked at online verbatims in trust portals, looked at thousands of them and their competitors, and I could abstract out of an enormous amount about what customers were thinking, what was important, how well you're performing, what was good, what was bad, and what to do about it. And of course, you have an enormous amount of data itself that you gather during your interactions with customers. So you have this rich source of video and images and voice and text and numbers that you can process. And I don't know whether you've been reading Sangeet Chowdhury's new book, Refresh. It is, I read a lot of books, as you know, and a lot of articles. And Sangeet's new book, Refresh, which is about how you use AI to advantage, is by far and away the best book I've read. In fact, he has a track record of writing his books about platform revolution and platform scale in the past, about how platforms are reinventing business. But his book on how we're going to use AI to do a variety of things is absolutely brilliant, and one I can recommend to everybody to read if you're interested in AI, which of course is everybody today. And he points out that AI is much better than we are at parsing all this disparate information and coordinating things as consequence.
Okay.
Are we looking at using AI to automate and save costs typically? I noticed the customer doesn't get anything out of that, of course. The experience actually gets worse. I had to talk to a credit card company recently, and it was so bad that I gave up halfway through. My wife had to talk to a telco yesterday, and the experience, she got through the call center person eventually after a 30-minute wait, but they were so useless, thank you T-Mobile, that she dropped off the call because she was getting no help at all, even for a simple question. So we can use AI for simple things like cost cutting and what have you, but there are far more useful things we can do with it by using its power to coordinate information from disparate sources to try and understand what's going on in the world of the customer. We'll talk about real lived experience in a minute, but Chris Law's tool, Bergson.ai, does this for the real lived experience in a way that is really quite amazing. This is why I think real lived experience is going to augment, it's not going to replace, it's going to augment customer experience, or CX, for many companies, particularly in certain industries. And if you think about it, I did a bit of searching around before this call, trying to gather some facts and figures that were interesting. Complicated things like neurodivergence, where people think and perceive the world differently to what everybody else does. That's 15% of the adult population in the UK. People living in chronic pain, which is I never had that misfortune, thankfully. Don't know people that have, and it is a life-changing thing. 43% of the UK adult population live with chronic pain of one form or another. When you get to be over 65, it's 70-something%. These are life-changing things. So, and people, a little bit closer to home, customers who are in difficulty. So we talk about vulnerable customers, so people who have challenges with health, with life events, with capability and resilience. 49% of the UK adult population has one or more of these symptoms. They are vulnerable customers. So the FCA has insisted that banks and financial services companies do something about this. But every telco, every utility, every large organization dealing with these customers ought to treat them differently, and ought to treat them with their lived experience, not to treat them as numbers. or as recipients of a standardized service which doesn't work for them.
Yeah.
I'd like to circle a little back to what Tony said earlier. Sorry if I interrupt your flow here.
No problem. I'll finish.
You mentioned Ryanair, which is a low-budget carrier. So Tony said something like well, you are going in there with low expectations, which are easy to meet, of course, and probably also even easy to exceed if the carrier chooses to. Now, my point is that a suitable goal at all, that expectations needed to get exceeded?
So there's two questions there. The first one is around Ryanair. So,
yeah, well, I just use them as an example.
No, it's a good example because
in Germany as well. So
I used to, before COVID struck, I would travel every week to the UK from Germany for work, as you know. So, and I'd done for 30 years, pretty much, traveling everywhere, every week. I was on one or two planes, backwards and forwards. I think in 1999, 2019, I think I took 220 flights that year, and that was not exceptional. I used to fly with Eurowings, German wings, and they became Eurowings. But after 3 times in a row, when I got a message on the train from Liverpool Street Station to Stansted Airport that the flight had been cancelled, and you could go to this website to rebook. Good luck with that, or try the call center. Good luck with that. Each time I got one of the last seats on a Ryanair plane that always took off. And then after 3 times, I switched to Ryanair and didn't travel with Eurowings at all after that. So my expectations are very, very high. My expectations are you will take off. I don't really care when. It's Friday night. I'm going home to see my family. I just want to get home. I don't care when I get there. I just want to get home. I don't want to be left, to my own devices in the middle of nowhere at an airport. So my expectations are very high that you will leave that day. You will get me home an hour later. Eurowings failed miserably 3 times on the trot. So I defected to Ryanair. So they met my expectations every time. There was never a time when they didn't take off. And often in the background, I was smiling to myself. Shouting forward is a terrible thing. But I smiling to myself when I hear the tannoy in the background saying, Eurowings so-and-so has been cancelled. And you're thinking, Ryanair's flying. So why aren't you flying? What's wrong with German wings or Eurowings? So my expectations are very high for what I wanted. And other things like meals on board and comfortable seats, it's only now, I don't really care. I'd stand if it was cheap enough. But it wasn't actually that cheaper than Eurowings anyway. So, but it is an ultra low cost carrier. They make money on filling up their planes in a way that no full service carrier or hybrid like Eurowings can ever make money. But it comes back to your point about exceeding expectations. I need to meet the minimum acceptable level of service. That's probably not good to be close to that, because then you're potentially at risk of defection if something better comes along. And Tony always talks about services need to be 25% better in order for you to switch, which I think is a reasonable yardstick. So you need to be better than that. But do you need to be all the way to the top, to the point where you're actually meeting the maximum expected? Probably not most of the time.
Yeah.
What happens really when you really need help is when things go wrong. So there's a great story from Maxi Schmidt. I saw one of Maxi Schmidt's comments on LinkedIn today about a customer who was involved in an accident, and Air New Zealand went out of its way to look after her, make sure she got home safely, to arrange things for the flight. And things like when you get to the airport, go to anybody with an Air New Zealand uniform and they will look after you. And she did, and they did. That's a rare event in the aviation industry, in my experience, or it used to be when I used to travel a lot. But it shows you what is possible. And I noticed also that they were number 3 on a recent survey of best airlines to travel with. So they must be doing something right.
It takes a little Kiwi attitude.
It does probably take.
I'm wearing the wrong hat today. Usually I have a silver fur.
It reminds me of when Colin Marshall came to British Airways. He was from Avis. And they were here famous for saying, we're number 2, we have to try harder.
Yeah.
It's come to giving up trying.
Yeah. But Tony did another comment. Let me bring it on. So he Well, of course, one needs to know that his company does RevOps. So he says RevOps is CX with a monetary priority. Would you agree to that statement? In how far?
It's a no-brainer, isn't it, really? If you go talk to them, there's been so many posts on this recently. Some really good people like Tom Goodwin and others post about this. And, the challenge that a lot of CX people have, that they go to the CFO with stories about our CSAT's gone up and our NPS score is now at its highest, and we have all these wonderful verbatims. And the CX is thinking, okay, tell me about large business effects. Tell me about share of market growth. Tell me about increased sales. Tell me about profit increase and so forth. This is my language as a CFO. You want my money, don't you? So you better talk my language, otherwise I'm going to send you to go and do your homework. But they have in the past. It's slowly changing. I mean, if you think about it, if you look at a standard shareholder value driver model, CX can only pull 5 levers. That's it. It can pull the lever. It can do various things that influences sales growth. It can pull levers that influence price and mix. So the mixture of prices you offer. It can pull levers that influence cost efficiencies, economies of scale, and operating leverage. And these drive operating profit margin and sales growth rate, which then feed into your standard shareholder value driver model. That's it. If you produce an amazing experience, a meaningfully differentiated experience, maybe you can pull competitive advantage period for a short period of time. It's only transient, as Rita McGrath has talked about often. So that's what levers you can pull. So if you're doing CX, you need to understand what you're going to do and how it influences the things that pull those levers that are relevant to the CFO. And one word of warning. There is a tendency, increasingly, which is a good sign, but it's not the end result. We should think about looking at the return on investment on CX. But I can almost guarantee any CX program has a positive return on investment by doing various things. I can absolutely reduce all the cost side as far as possible. I can be very careful about how I measure success. And I can be very good at including all sorts of things that weren't to do with me that actually show that I've been successful. So all those things that years of brand building have allowed you to create, I can claim those as a success of my ROI for my CX opportunity. But ROI, or more correctly, return on invested capital, is only a short-term horizon one measure in the CFO's world. So it's how we can leverage our current capability to get more out of them. It's not a growth measure, which is NPV. It's not a building a portfolio of options measure, which is the option valuation. So yes, by all means have an ROI calculation, but show how it drives growth and develops options, and align it with all of those key levers that show shareholder value growth or large business effects, including market share and all those other things as well. You do that and people will take notice of you. So yeah, Tony's exactly right. Show me your NPS score. Great. Thank you very much indeed. There's the door. Show me how you've increased my sales growth rate, and I'll give you more money.
Why don't more CX people do that?
It's a very good question. I think there's several reasons for these things are not complicated to work out. This is finance 101. You don't have to work in corporate finance to be able to do these things.
Agreed.
I think often they don't have the data because often they're not allowed to run things. I think they often don't have the opportunity to go and talk to the CFO very often anyway, because again, it's not operational, not operational critical discipline. They don't run marketing or sales or service or operations or something like that. So they're less likely to see the CFO anyway. And there's also, there are schools of practice, let's put it that way, which are about, we do surveys in PS, we do other things that aren't really that important to the CFO. So it's a mental model change for these people as well. I hope you can't hear the dogs working in the background.
You got contractors in your house too?
This is more than one dog.
Yeah, we've got 4 downstairs.
Well,
I'll be quiet in a second.
They are certainly improving the home experience.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There's probably a cat coming next door that's disturbing them.
Yeah. So
then they give
is that
some advice.
that one of the core challenges is that they don't have the right data. So what needs to get set up to get this data that helps tying CX objectives or their achievement to strategic objectives like more customer lifetime value, more market share, more whatever, that the CFO gets and stays interested.
Yes.
And how do you get them fast and precise?
Yeah, again, it's very difficult. One of my former clients, Dan Bates, used to talk about collecting all the data and having and understanding truth and meaning. So collecting a version of the truth and be able to identify meaning from that data. Most organizations don't really have one version of the truth. They have multiple versions. So there are struggles with actually getting one version of the truth out of most large organizations anyway, because of the way they calculate things. The same underlying data often, but different calculation approaches. If you don't have access to the data, you have to go and find partners who do. And you have to buddy it with other people who get access to it and provide you with a feed or provide you with a cube you can work with yourself and tools to be able to analyze that data. So I think most of the data is fundamentally available, because I think it's just quite difficult to get at sometimes. But that's the big data that most organizations readily historical data about the past and what we did and so forth. But that's not the data we really need often in terms of CX. And that's what if we have this big data, we also need or thin data, as I think about it. We also need thick contextual data. So the big data tell you about what you did in the past, but it won't tell you about what you wanted to do. It won't tell you about what you did with others. It won't tell you about the experience you wanted to have, only you didn't provide it. So if you want to find those things, you have to go and talk to customers in different ways. You have to do design research and gather this contextually rich information, what Nora Bateson calls warm data or zero-party data, proper zero-party data that you would not normally give to a company. Because we know that when we give data to companies, they will abuse it for their own advantage, not for our advantage. So these things typically stay in the domain of the customer, often in the handset, the mobile devices which we live, many experiences through. So there's a couple of things out of that you can start to do design research as well, as long as to gain thick data to go with your thin data or your big data, and also recognize that slowly but surely, power is moving from the centers, power of decisioning, power of access to data, power over what you do with data is moving from the center to the edge, moving on to handsets and data wallets are now embedded in mobile devices where customers have control over their own data. They have control over who gets to access to see it and they have control over what they get in return. AI will accelerate that, and is already starting to do so. There's a whole variety of startups doing that already. But that's a fundamental threat to a lot of the MarTech platforms with their one big brain in the center model, which is based on, if you like, a slightly simplified anthropomorphic model of how humans are. We think this model, the brain decides everything. If you look at a developing child, then the brain does decide some things, but there aren't enough genes that we have in our genetic code to be able to code for all the things that we do. So we develop morphologically by local action, by making choices at a local cellular level. That equivalent is we give a lot of that control, or that control is taken from us by customers with edge-based devices, handsets, with self-sovereign data, and apps that allow you to control who gets access to it, to do what, and what you get in return. This word is coming.
I want to get the discussion in a different direction by going and showing a question or comment. Can you read it, Tom? Or I can do it. The question from Vinal, what he faced in is of whether companies need to exceed the expectations. And not long ago, he did a series on LinkedIn and asked many executives, including CX experts, whom he spoke to and analyzing their posts, which told them their preferred focus on standardizing operations to constantly meet expectations that doing this rather than to focus on trying to exceed expectations. He thinks that it's quite depressing that CX professionals themselves are saying things like that.
Let me throw a wrench right in there. I think that's right, because striving to constantly exceeding expectations is a recipe for disaster, because it's a vicious circle. Yeah? You exceed my expectation once, I'm happy. You exceed them twice, I'm still happy. You exceed them 3 times, is it thrice? And then I expect it. And from there on, it spirals out of control. Yeah. And it will become unattainable from a financial perspective.
If you look at the definition of customer delight, so Roland Rust, the celebrated service marketing academic, wrote some really great articles a few years ago about customer delight, and he made a very clear point that delight requires 2 things. It requires over delivery against expectations, so exceeding your maximum expected level of service. It requires surprise as well.
Yeah,
I expect it. It's not delight. It's my expectation. So as you say, we know that if you keep ratcheting up the degree of delight, so the lady I talked about who had this terrible accident and only didn't really went out of its way to look after, that was a delightful thing in a very poor circumstance.
Yeah.
But if you do that for everybody, you're going to run out of, you become a charity to a certain extent, you're going to run out of money really quickly. So you need to be careful, I think, when you exceed expectations and for whom and in which circumstances. But you know what? Those will often there may be principles in the center about when we do that, but the decision should be made by a person or these days a technology at the edge. They have more information than the center will ever have. This contextual data again. They're the people who need to make those choices. But again, within guidelines, we can't have it to the point where if everyone's providing different experiences, then we have low quality service, because quality service means we know we get the same thing each time, rather than getting something completely different each time. So it's a difficult balancing act to make. But I agree with what the question said.
Yeah. So that's why I'm again to Vimal. I'm normally using a model that I call the abbreviated Maslow pyramid of customer expectations. It's basically 3 E's. First, you need to be effective. You won't win any, as we say in German, flower pot there. But if you're not effective, then you certainly lose. Then there's no need to be efficient, which is the second layer. You can be very efficient without being effective, so just doing the wrong thing. Sure. Make it easy for the customer, efficient for the customer. That's where you likely should strive at. And then you have the emotional thing. That's the peak of the pyramid. Sure. Sometimes make him really totally and utterly happy, or her. Yes. So but don't make that an objective to always get there.
Yeah, sure. I think that's, emotions is a difficult word. Emotions as one meaning in neuroscience and different in popular conversations. So we often talk about feelings in the real world rather than emotions, which are more subconscious. But if you look at, just combine the 2 words and you call it emotions, people talk about designing for emotion, but I find it quite manipulative in some ways. So I talked about service experience a minute ago. I prefer to design a superior experience that caters for the needs of a broad range of people, rather than trying to design an emotion. Because I know that after doing this for donkey's years, if I produce great service, I'm going to get lots of the right emotions. But I'll also get, at the same time, inevitably, some emotions I don't like so much because of the way things actually are. So you can have very high satisfaction and still have negative emotions, but it doesn't necessarily have a big impact on whether you're going to repurchase again in the future or recommend to others.
Yeah. If we get to German railway system and German telecom, such as if German railways would be on time again, that would be something which comes to Thomas' pyramid. And at least we have a lot of positive emotion.
That's at the bottom of the pyramid.
The thing is, if you analyze, I'm not a frequent traveler, and I know why I'm not a frequent traveler on German railway system. When I travel, I have a problem. So there must be a complex chain in between me and German railway. But saying that, it is that out of 10 trips I had this year, only 1 was smooth and
Yes.
9 were disaster area. And
It's-
the emotion created is a heck. And my internet capabilities here in my little town, Horsbach, are always like you have one of these surprise eggs. It might work. Yeah. You're grateful. Now back to you, William.
But I mean, yeah, Deutsche Bahn has problems, which is why their CEO was fired by the Minister of Transport a couple of days ago, after 10 years or whatever in this post. And but it's a bottomless pit, tipping money into railway systems. We've seen pretty every country in the world, maybe to the exception of Switzerland, which has amazing trains, or Japan. I was reading the other day about the Japanese railways apologizing profusely to customers because they were 20 seconds late in leaving the station.
Yep.
When I used to travel a lot in the UK, I'd travel a lot between Slough and London Paddington on the railway service. Sometimes I was actually very happy when the train came at all. Not that it was 20 seconds too early or too late, but these are complex service systems.
Yeah.
It's an ecosystem with many moving parts of people and infrastructure and technologies and what have you. And as we know, we get emergent phenomena that come out of those interactions that we can't necessarily predict, that we're not necessarily prepared for. But Deutsche Bahn has it's a very, very complicated, if not complex, problem to deal with.
It is simply that I just didn't want to show to the audience that we are only looking into airlines how they are performing or overachieving, or that with a minimal delivery of service, they win our hearts, at least if we come on time to our beloved ones.
In how far would you say that there is a correlation between a company's ability to ring fence the customer or put them into a walled garden, and as opposed to having more competition?
That's a topic for a whole convo by itself in terms of market dynamics and what have you, and antitrust dynamics as well. Meta is a good example. So Meta, has, I don't know how many billions of customers it has at the moment, and it's always in the news for the wrong reasons, unfortunately. But that's a choice of Zuckerberg and senior board of management, how they operate their business and their difficult relationship with regulators around the world. But there's a study a few years ago that looked at what you'd be willing to accept if you were not to use Meta for a year, and the number came out to be slightly over $1,000. So in order not to have access to all the things you get through Meta or Facebook, when they did the study, you'd have to be compensated by receiving $1,000 a year. So that's an enormous consumer surplus. And of course, people complain about them harvesting data, which is probably true, but customers either don't care or seem to be quite happy to trade off their use of data and advertising that comes with it in exchange for the ability to keep in contact with relations in foreign places, post pictures of your breakfast, or be in contact with other cat lovers around the world. It's not for us to dictate what they should do and what they shouldn't do. It's up to us to facilitate their behavior, good behaviors ideally, with appropriate tools and services. Which, I mean, I want to go back quickly. The theme of what we were talking about was this idea of the real lived experience. And to go back to your train example. So if you're a neurodivergent person who struggles enormously with change, we know that, and your train is cancelled or delayed by a long period of time, and then you get on the tunnel, the conductor or on the train saying your alternative connections at wherever it may be are X, Y, and Z. That neurodivergent person is probably going to struggle, because the service is designed for normal. I'm very careful about my use of language. It's designed for people who are not neurodivergent, who can deal with those changes. Not everybody can deal with those changes, incidentally. A lot of people go a little bit strange, but a neurodivergent person can't deal with the changes in the same way that we can deal with them as non-neurodivergent people. So we need to understand more about the real lived experience of the customer, in particular those vulnerable groups or neurodivergent groups or people with health challenges or whatever, if we're going to provide great service. And that requires a change of thinking. It requires a change from thinking about how we represent experiences to how we relate to those experiences. That's one of the changes, the 5 changes that we need to think about. We have to start thinking about, not about journeys, A, B, C, D, E, all the way through to Z in a neat order, but the real world is different. It's things go backwards and things stop and things, take pauses, and they're influenced by many external factors. So we need to think about, rather than journeys, about fields of influence. Influence the customer's real lived experience. We have to stop thinking about necessarily needs as a static thing. I need X or I need Y, but to start thinking about how much of those things, how about intensities instead. And for people who are neurodivergent, then that can be quite different to somebody who's not neurodivergent. As an example, in the train example, we have to stop thinking about co-creating services, the designly approach, but providing real-time feedback and co-composing things while things are happening, which requires a completely different way of thinking about things, again, enabled by AI. But think about moving from thinking about satisfaction, are you satisfied with the service you received, to how can we transform that experience to make things better for customers? Well, now you're just satisfied. And last but not least, one of the challenges that jobs has is we abstract things out at a moment in time. I need to do this job at a moment in time. Move away from abstraction and simplistic moment in time representations to think about the real lived experience that people have. So from representation to relations, from journeys to fields, from needs to intensities, from co-creation to co-composition in real time, from satisfaction transformation, and from abstraction to the real lived experience. This is the next generation of thinking in how we think about the customer experience. And for all those people who are neurodivergent or who have pain problems or whatever it may be, this is where we need to be going, because it's the only way we're going to be able to, support them in their needs.
Completely agreed. And you could run onto open doors with Winfried Felser, our dear friend from Cologne, who is in the area of co-creation, co-designing, and all that stuff. Honest.
I'm not the expert on this. The expert is Chris Law. If you want to know more about it, Chris has got a great white paper. Go and read it. I mean, I sent it to you today, so you probably read it already. But he's the guy who I look up to learn from this stuff about. But I can recognize a good thing when I see it.
2 minutes.
Talking about next generation thinking.
Yeah.
So we have talked a lot about concepts right now. And well, those concepts hopefully sooner or later get translated into systems, because we need systems to effectively and efficiently do whatever. So now, looking into next generation CX platforms. So if you were to design one, so we're charged with designing one from scratch.
Yes.
No limits.
Yes.
What do you think are what in your eyes are the top 3 non-negotiable features that you want to have in there?
Okay, so I'm going to put it back slightly different. I'll ask you a question with 3 items. So the first thing is, we need to understand our customers in ways that we don't understand them today. Picking up all that, talking about contextual, real life, warm data, and what have you. So we need to understand in detail their real lived experience, because that's going to be the new foundation of working.
Mm-hmm.
The second thing is, we're not going to automate or improve what we've already got. The systems we have today are designed around the limitations of humans. We have AI now. It's still emerging in terms of what we can do, but we know where the direction of travel is heading. So I'm going to be using this knowledge about the real lived experience to reinvent how we provide service from the ground up.
Mm-hmm.
But designed not around the limitations of humans, designed around the capabilities of AI. There's going to be humans involved in extensively. It's probably going to be a centaur type model, but it's going to be driven by access to new forms of data, the soft real RLX data, and the capabilities of AI, not by the limitations of humans.
Mhm.
That implies also that I'm going to have to completely rethink how we measure performance. So if I'm redesigning how work is done at a more granular level, probably at the task or subtask level, which bits can a human do, which bit should a computer or an AI do for us, then I'm going to be looking to create a whole new series of measures that continuously measure, monitor, and manage how we perform, so we can become what Martin Reeves, a senior BCG a partner, describes as a self-tuning organization.
Mhm.
And it's probably going to be driven by the customer as much as it is by management.
Yeah.
It's not quite what you're looking for, perhaps, as an answer.
No,
That's what I would
I've-
do today. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact that AI is going to have a huge change, but not if you just use it to automate what we've already got.
I didn't have any answer in mind. So,
You've got one in your mind now.
well, and I wouldn't disagree with anything that you just said. So all is good.
There's a great
Although
story
in certain circles I have the nickname of the contrarian meanwhile, but not here and not now.
There's a great story by the late Sir Ken Robinson who talks about a little girl who never paid attention except in art class. And one day the art teacher the girl was busy painting, and the art teacher goes over and says, "What are you painting?" And the girl says, "I'm painting a picture of God." But the teacher says, "But nobody knows what God looks like." To which the girl replied, "They will in a minute." So I would try to provide you with that high-level picture where we're going with CX, with RLX at the center, with AI, reinventing around AI, and rethinking about how we measure performance.
Yeah.
That's where we're going. That's my picture of the CX gods and what they'll be saying to us, whoever they are.
Cool, great stuff, and great famous last words, actually. So thanks a lot, Graham. This was, as usual, amazing.
Thank you. It's always my pleasure.
Exceeding expectations, to quote Vimal. So don't do it too often, because the expectations are getting higher and higher.
That's okay. Those new tricks up my sleeves.
Thanks to everybody who participated. And to the audience, if you want to be in a CRM Convo, just as opposed to on the sidelines as you are right now, let us know. We'll be glad to accommodate for that. Last but not least, next week, tune in to an AI topic again, when we again have Dr. Michael Wu and John Reed discussing on AI and where it's going and why not. So, and this time we really expect some controversy between those two differently thinking people. I'm really looking forward to that, and I hope that we'll meet you there too. Okay. See you then next week.
Take care.
Bye.
Ciao, ciao.
Till next week.